Check it out. My silver YouTube play button showed up last week, and I know it's just a chintzy award to hang on the wall, but this one's thanks to you guys. You guys gave me this award. 100,000 subscribers. I really appreciate this one. We've got a way to go before we hit that gold play button, though. Now, in this episode, we're going to focus on building control arms for the other side of the car. If you haven't realized at this point, we've only got control arms as well as spindles and brakes mounted to one side of this thing. So we're going to duplicate it all and get the other side set up. We've got to pull all the old suspension pieces off, install the new suspension pieces, install our spindles and brakes, all in an effort to get this thing ready to set down on the ground for the first time when our wheels arrive here in a couple of weeks. If we knock everything out successfully in this episode, all we should have left is to build some toe links, extend some tie rods, and to make mounts for the shocks themselves. We're on the home stretch to set this thing down, so let's make some progress. If everything goes according to plan, this will be the last set of control arms that we have to build, and we're going to be building them out of 1-inch diameter DOM tubing with an 0.95 wall thickness. I've walked you guys through the process of how I build these in previous episodes, but for anybody that's joined since then, at least half of you guys, I'm going to walk you through one last time. I make these using my tubing bender, which is a JD squared unit that I've mounted vertically on an old engine stand, and I have it mounted this way because it really simplifies getting bends in plane. It's also capable of making bends up to 180 degrees, and it can bend anything from this small 1-inch tube all the way up to tubing that's 2.5 inches in diameter with a 1/4 inch wall thickness. With a few bends put into a single piece of tube, we've got something we can work with, and now it's time to head over to the bandsaw and start cutting our pieces out. We'll cut everything to an appropriate length, but we'll worry about finessing that last 1/16 of an inch or so with the angle grinder once we start lining things up with our template. Speaking of templates, I showed in the last episode the process of going through and identifying all of the correct templates since we haven't worked with any of this stuff in nearly 6 months. These templates show us exactly what to build and include all the small details like those bender measurements we needed for the tubing bender and the lengths we need to cut on the bandsaw. The 1-to-1 scale of these drawings means we can work directly on top of them, making this process as easy as it could possibly be. We're going to have to salvage some of the other pieces we need to build these control arms off of some of our previous control arm attempts, such as the threaded tube receivers for the heim joints and the tapered receivers for the upper ball joints. It's an easy recovery because we only tacked everything into place, and with that we have all the pieces that we need in order to build new control arms this time around. It's just down to preparation. We need to bevel the ends of all of our tubes so that we get good weld penetration between all of our metal pieces. I've been using this Milwaukee Die Grinder for nearly a year at this point, and it's still one of my favorite tools in the shop. We're going to use it this time in order to clean our metal before welding, and I want to show you two of my favorite attachments in order to do that. The first is this coral-like 3M paint stripper pad, and you can find them pretty much anywhere including Lowe's and Home Depot. The other is a bit more effective though. It's a 3M deburring wheel, and it'll conquer anything you throw at it, whether you're just cleaning up cold-rolled steel or trying to take the mill scale off of hot-rolled. I'll throw a link to both attachments and the grinder in the description in case you want to try them out for yourself. Using the flap wheel on the angle grinder, I'm finessing the fitment of all of the tubes and getting the copes just right for welding. These tubes need to be really accurate because it's going to affect the alignment of the vehicle if we have anything off. For the welding process, I'm not just tacking this stuff together, but I'm not fully welding it yet either. I think it's important to get enough weld into place so that it can support the weight of the vehicle once we set it down, but I don't want to do anything that's irreversible in case we want to make any changes once our wheels arrive. I want to make sure that our tube receivers, or more importantly, our tapered ball joint receivers, are removable if I need to recover them one final time. But I do feel pretty good about everything, so a little bit of extra weld will make sure that this stuff doesn't come apart when we set it down. Because welding, or even just tack welding, can cause parts to move around, I've got everything clamped to the table. The more welding involved, the more clamps I'm using, because it's imperative that nothing moves. It'll affect the alignment of the car and the way that it drives. It doesn't need to be perfect down to the 1,000th of an inch, but it does need to be relatively accurate according to our templates. After installing our Heim joints and ball joints, we have 4 complete control arms ready to go on the car. Or rather, at this point, we've got 8 complete control arms ready to go on the car, because the other side we did 6 months ago. Initially, we were going to wait to do these until we had our wheels in hand to confirm that the wheels would fit the way we ordered, but with our custom wheels on the way from Rotiform, I know I'm going to get exactly what I asked for. So we went on ahead and finished the other side, but to install it, I've actually got to remove all of the suspension components off of the driver's side of the car. Believe it or not, they've been installed this entire time because there's been no need to remove them. But thankfully, disassembly was as easy as it could get and everything came right apart. Now, I do want to take a second to answer some questions I know several people are going to have. After all, we're like 100 episodes into this series. It's quote-unquote the longest build I've ever seen, according to some guy in the comments. So why are we changing all of the suspension? After all, Ferrari did do a good job with the original parts here, and I don't necessarily think I can do better than they did. That's not what we're trying to do. But the problem is, we're trying to make a bunch of different things work when they were never intended to. So let's lay the parts on the workbench and let me try my best to explain our goals and what we're trying to accomplish. Our changes actually begin with the bodywork of the car. As is quite obvious, we've got a wide body kit attached to it, and thus we have widened the car by several inches per side. But originally, this body kit was only designed for aesthetics. Of course, we could just mount bigger wheels and tires underneath it, but doing so would come with several drawbacks, and I want to try to fix that. For starters, if we wanted wheels to fit the factory suspension and the body kit, we'd be looking at a 9.5 in the front with a -50 offset, and a 10.5 in the rear with a -80 offset, and that's flat out insane. So on top of fixing the immense load it would place on the wheel hubs, I also want to solve things like the terrible scrub radius that it'd have. So comparing our front lower control arm with the original piece, you can see that they are pretty similar. The shape is relatively the same between the two, with the major change being the length from the Heim joints to the ball joint itself. By increasing this length, we can do 2 things. We can increase our track width to improve our handling, and we can begin to solve our scrub radius, although the rest of that will come from changing the spindle itself. Obviously, similar changes come to the upper control arm, but looking at the spindle, you can see that there is a major offset between the kingpin angle and the wheel mounting surface in front of the brake rotor. These changes, along with a few others, should solve all of our issues with the front. And taking a look at the rear, obviously we don't have to account for scrub radius, but we do want to solve that track width issue. And there's another thing, a much bigger issue that we need to solve. Now for the rear end, the big thing is that we want to get rid of this factory Ferrari upright, and more importantly, this factory Ferrari stub axle. This thing that rotates here transmits power from your transmission on this side to your wheel and tire on this side. And while this is based on forum posts, and I know that that can be questionable as far as its truthiness, there's a lot of information online that tells me there is a design flaw with this stub axle. There is a cut around its circumference that has a straight edge on it, and it should have a radiused edge. With that straight edge, there is a weak point, and that can cause it to fracture. Apparently, even with a stock engine and very sticky tires on a 308, you can cause this to fracture, and when that happens, the wheel and tire leave the car. Now, I'm pretty sure you don't want that to happen. I haven't found a reason you would want that to happen yet. I don't want it to happen to me. That's gonna damage a lot of stuff and cost a lot of money when it happens. And considering we're gonna put 315s on the back of this car and make a ton of horsepower, I'm pretty confident we're gonna break this with ease. Now, while we could put a custom stub axle in here that would solve that problem, if we're putting all of this work into the front end, why would we leave the rear end the way that it is? I mean, it would make a huge challenge in terms of matching things like bolt patterns and matching our brake setups. And we're using old parts and pieces when we could upgrade it and get a lot of new benefits. We could have our bolt patterns match, we can have hubs that have integrated wheel speed sensors, and considering the fact that we have the cumulative wealth of human knowledge at our fingertips thanks to the internet, I'm pretty sure we can upgrade it and make some improvements while we're at it. I'm not saying that I'll get it right on the first try, but there's nothing wrong with failing if you're trying. I'd rather give this a shot and realize I need to revise it than just do this because it's easy with a custom stub axle. So, we're gonna get rid of this. We're gonna make as many improvements to this thing as we can. We're gonna get our track width widened out. We're gonna make this whole body kit function a lot better for us. We're gonna improve our brake options, our wheel hub options, hopefully improve our geometry, and we're gonna learn something while we do it. So this thing's going on the shelf or in the dumpster, or I don't know, maybe somebody wants it, I don't know. Now, another note on these things, because a lot of people have made comments about it in the past, and I figured it was kind of obvious, but apparently not. I am going to put a bar between the ends of all these control arms, a spreader bar to make sure that they are nice and rigid. We're also going to put a gusset in the ditch of each control arm, really just to kind of strengthen them all up and make sure that they can't deform and things like that. I'm going to have to be careful while I weld them, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, I will say that I'm not positive that I'm going to make those gussets we did in a previous episode that'll run on the bottoms of the control arms. A few people pointed out that it's probably overkill, and they're probably right. And I also don't want the control arms to be the strongest portion of the suspension, because if we start hopping curbs on the racetrack and have really stiff spring rates and all that kind of stuff, I'd rather have a control arm bend than transmit that energy to the chassis and start bending the chassis or the suspension mounts and things like that, because that's going to be a lot harder to fix. So we'll keep the control arms as a wear and tear item and just keep kind of an eye on them as we really test the car and make sure that they are indeed strong enough. We can always reinforce them later, but I think that's the right move. Okay, so enough blabbering about everything. It's time to finally install the control arms on the driver's side of the car. Thankfully, everything fit up exactly as anticipated, and there were no unexpected differences between the driver and passenger side of the Ferrari. Following the control arms was the installation of the spindle and then the brakes. Controversial opinion while I put these on. I'm gonna say it. Washers are directional. Flat side down, radius side up. Depends on which direction they're stamped. At me, I don't care. There is one control arm mount that I'll have to make for the rear before we can install all the parts, but otherwise, this is a finished project and we're ready to move on to those remaining pieces I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. The resulting track width change from the control arms on each side of the car is an increase in 3 inches overall, and I think that's going to be well worth the effort. And we crossed a bunch of other issues off the list once and for all. So we finally have all of our control arms wrapped up. We've got all 4 spindles finished. The brakes are done. We only have a few pieces left to actually finish out this suspension. I need to make a toe link for the rear, and I mentioned in the last episode I was going to fix it to the control arm, but a few of you pointed out that would not work unless I got it exactly in plane with the control arm, because the angle of the control arm to the spindle changes as it cycles. That idea isn't going to work, so I'm just going to go with a proper toe link mounted to the chassis, so we'll design that and get that built for Tuesday's episode. That's what I'm going to work on over the weekend. I also need to extend my tie rods in the front so we can connect the front wheels together and steer this thing around the shop. We're going to have to worry about Ackerman after the fact, but we'll get there. And then I need to make some mounts so we can actually bolt the coilovers into place so this thing can actually sit on its own weight. Now, I don't have the coilovers from H&R yet, but what we can do is make some turnbuckles so we can at least set it down on solid suspension. We're getting really close, though. I know that might sound like a long list, but I mean, we've got a car that runs and has most of its suspension finished at this point. We're really going to start getting into the details of this thing that last 10% before long. I feel pretty excited. This is the closest it's been. And I got my tires and I set them into the car last night. I'll show you that on Friday's episode. It was sick. Now for the next episode, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from fabrication because I bought some scales and we're going to weigh the car. If you've been watching since the beginning of the series, you know that at the beginning I was very weight conscious about it. I was weighing everything we were taking off the car. This car was heavy in stock form, 3,200 pounds for a very tiny car. I think that that's pretty piggy. So ideally, we're going to be pulling a lot of weight out of this thing. We're going to weigh it. We're going to find out where we're at. Now, there's still a lot of weight that needs to go on the car yet. We have wheels and tires. That's not going to be lightweight, even if we have lightweight wheels. It's still probably going to be over 100 pounds in total weight, or certainly going to be over 100 pounds in total weight that's got to go on. We got a passenger seat. We've still got lots of bits and pieces, so I would guess 200 to 300 pounds in total still has to go back onto this car to finish it out. But leave a guess in the comments. Let me know what you think it's going to weigh. I'm curious. I'm still hopeful we'll come in on Friday, maybe if I'm lucky, 2,200-ish. That'd be pretty sick. I don't know. We're going to see. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to weigh the car, find out where we're at. I'll catch you guys then. Thank you as always for the support. Oh, and if you ordered a shirt or apparel or any of the StanceWorks gear, everything has shipped out as of the time this episode goes live, except for orders that have a plate frame and some poster orders, because I'm waiting on some mailing packaging so I can ship them out, and that stuff's all been delayed. But otherwise, everything is shipped. Thank you for the patience. I'm sorry it's taken a little bit of time to package everything up, but it's like several hundred orders, so it's taking a little bit of time. Anyways, thank you for the support. I'll catch you guys on Friday. I'll see you then.